Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your place for all those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. This is episode number 187 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast. And in this episode, we're here to talk about some NFL football. But wait a minute, Dylan. Didn't the NFL season end 2 weeks ago with the Super Bowl, where you endured all that heartbreak, all that disappointment that you were talking about? Well, yes, thanks for reminding me. Thanks for letting me remind myself of that. But that's exactly what we're here to talk about once again, 2 weeks later, as we're about to kick off NFL season recap month, or at least prelude into that, prologue into that, as we head into the month of March. As, yes, we prelude into our annual tradition that is NFL season recap month with a recap of my team, the San Francisco 49ers, in their 2023 NFL season. So, before we get things started here, just a little bit of a ramble here before we get things going. Yeah, I've had 2 weeks to reflect, 2 weeks to think about the NFL season, and, well, not just the general NFL season, but my 49ers season as a whole, and I have a lot to say. I took down some notes in terms of their season, and, well, a long offseason that already was, and the discourse online in regards to not just their season as a whole, but the offseason already, like 2 days after the Super Bowl. But we'll get into all of that in our kickoff, or our pre-show, our pre-kickoff to our NFL season recap month, which begins in March, which is coming up very soon. Very soon, pal. A little bit of side notes before we get into our little housekeeping. A little bit of follow-up to my Elimination Chamber review. In case you missed that episode, go back and watch that after this episode right here. For all my wrestling fans out there, even my non-wrestling fans out there. A little bit of follow-up to that. I did catch up on Monday Night Raw. Yes, for as unenthusiastic as I am with this WrestleMania season. Yeah, I caught that that build up to that match. And, well, it's exactly what you all wanted, right? It's exactly what you all wanted. Mommy versus the man. The man always comes around. Oh, but with a greater man, with a great man comes always a greater woman, or whatever. Mommy's always on top. Yeah, we get 5 weeks of this. I know it's only the first week, but are you really gonna expect more? Are you really gonna expect less from Triple Nose? When instead, what you could have had was a built-in revenge story, a built-in revenge story that you could have expanded on for the next 5 weeks with, Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. But no, people wanted the big money match that's only going to be tagged by Mommy versus the man. Oh, cool. Oh, that's all great and dandy. And then you realize, man, this match was shit. Well, I mean, I'll eat my words on how the match actually is, but then I'll remind myself, look at what last year with Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. But anyway, I mean, that's just my opinion on it. But I don't want to go too long into that ramble because we have more important things to talk about. Sorry, hold on that, because there was an interesting thing that happened in follow-up on a little relation to that. Like, what are they doing with Liv Morgan, man? Are they getting her involved in this or what? Are they actually getting her involved in this? Are they actually trying to shoehorn into this, making it a triple threat? Are they going to make her a heel, like, seriously, at the expense of Becky Lynch? No. Keep in mind, people, for those of you listening to this opening monologue of this, or whatever you want to call this opening of this, Liv Morgan is not the heel, okay? She is the babyface. I see people on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, like, people are saying, this is the start of a Liv Morgan heel turn. No, people. Liv Morgan is the hero in all this. Liv Morgan is the hero. Becky Lynch is the heel. Becky Lynch is the heel for being a Hulk Hogan. She's Becky Hogan because she pulled that's not going to work for the man, sister. She went full Hulk Hogan and stole Liv Morgan's WrestleMania spot. at Elimination Chamber. Sure, the way that she did it was kind of fair and square, but still, she probably went to Triple H. It's like, oh, this is not going to work for me. This is not going to work for the man, sister. And said, I want that WrestleMania spot and want the mommy versus the man. I know it's just all fun and games, but besides to get the point. Noseman said, I want the big money match that's gonna make it. Oh, and fuck the story, fuck the stories. But anyway, enough about that. If you want to go check my Elimination Chamber review, after this episode, go tune into that. Now, make sure you follow me on social media on Instagram and Twitter at Very Cold Lasagna. For all my audio listeners out there, make sure you rate and review the show 1 to 5 stars. And for all of you watching on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, leave a comment, share it with your friends, share it with a stranger, share it with your coworkers, share this with whoever you want to share this with in regards to Very Cold Lasagna, whether it's good or bad, any of my takes. And make sure, like I said, leave a comment with your own takes on everything that I talk about in all the episodes of Very Cold Lasagna. That being said, let's get into our topic of the day, and that's kicking this off with NFL season recap month here on Very Cold Lasagna. I'll be going into more detail of what exactly NFL season recap month is when we actually kick this off in March, which again is coming up very soon. But in regard to my San Francisco 49ers, oh man, I have a lot to say about this team. But let's just say that I always like to start my season recaps with my team, which is the San Francisco 49ers, like what they did during the course of, in this case, 2023, and what they did right, what they did wrong, a couple of standout moments, and then what they need to do for the offseason. And well, in my opinion, which is already in full swing, by the way, which has kind of come up pretty fast. But nonetheless, I like to start off with my team and then go the rest of the distance and in March. Now, it would have been a different case if, they actually finished the story 2 weeks ago. But sadly, no, they did not. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that as we go along in this episode. So let's take a look at my San Francisco 49ers when it pertains to this past 2023 NFL season. Because when you think about my 49ers last year, when they were sitting in this spot, fresh off the NFC Championship game in Philadelphia, we were talking about what if. Like, it was a season... It was a season that, we could have actually won this thing. We could have actually won this thing against, well, ironically, the Chiefs or the Bengals. But instead, we were talking about just prior to the Super Bowl that was being held between the Eagles and the Chiefs in Arizona. We sat here last year in the same room. What if the Niners actually went on to the Super Bowl? And, well, who knows what would have happened, whether it be Cincinnati or Kansas City. What if they had beat the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia in that championship game? So, like I said, that was the second straight season that the 49ers were sent home, one game short of making the Super Bowl. But it was not because that they lost the NFC Championship game to the Eagles. It was because of what happened and how it happened in that game. It felt very empty. It felt very incomplete. I still vividly remember, I was at work on a Sunday. Yes, sadly, unfortunately, I had to work on that Sunday. And, I was fortunate enough to, check in on the game, see how it was going. And I was vividly upset questioning that why was Brock Purdy not in the game? Where is he? Why is Josh Johnson in? It was like very frustrating because we were down big. We eventually down big. So the reason ended up being, for those of you that don't really follow the sports, the suddenly rising rookie quarterback at the time Brock Purdy, the last pick in the NFL draft, aka Mr. Irrelevant, taken out just a few plays into the game with an elbow injury to his throwing arm on contact by Hassan Reddick. Why? Because his offensive line was trash. So anyway, at that point, San Francisco had already lost their second-year quarterback, Trey Lance, as well as their already longtime starter, Jimmy Garoppolo, to leg injuries. Mainly ankle injuries. Now that they've already lost Brock Purdy, who was on the rise, then they had to rely on Josh Johnson, the journeyman. But he was also lost in the game to a concussion in the third quarter. So basically, they were helpless. They were helpless in that game. They were defenseless. And all of us fans could do was be like them. They were just sitting, lying in wait for this game to be over with, waiting for the suffering to be over with until all they could do was just watch Philadelphia celebrate, go to the Super Bowl, and heartbreak and disappointment suffered yet again by San Francisco. It was pretty much an ending where there was no chance in hell the Niners could compete, and it was an end to the season where they actually had a real good chance to finally get that elusive number 6 that they always like to talk about so much. So it was an off season. That's why it's an off season full of what ifs. It felt like a very incomplete ending to the season. Like that game compared to last year, where the year prior, where they experienced total heartbreak to the Rams. This one felt very incomplete. So, at this point last year during the offseason, Purdy went on to get elbow surgery, which was delayed like a month for who knows and what reason. The Niners went on to have this long offseason quarterback competition between Trey Lance and the deserted former first-round pick, Sam Darnold, who they decided to pick up as a backup quarterback, initially at least, to see who would be the starter in the event that Brock Purdy wasn't ready to go for week 1. So we thought. So as we get deeper and deeper, closer to the preseason, that so-called battle for the starter position was actually a disguise as, Purdy managed to come back in time for training camp, fully healthy enough to play in the second preseason game. Trey Lance and Sam Darnold did actually compete for the starting position in the first preseason game. And then Brock Purdy came back in the second preseason game. Looked okay. Didn't get too many starting reps. But then you get to the third preseason game, and then hours beforehand, just enjoying my, I think it was like a weekday that it happened. A questionable decision came around. The organization, John Lynch, made a choice decision to not only demote Trey Lance to the third string position, but then he traded him away to the Dallas Cowboys hours before the final preseason game. And I was just thinking to myself, I think I remember talking about I don't know if I talked about it on this podcast or on the YouTube channel during the time. And I was just thinking to myself, this was a very dumbass decision, which I guess you could consider it a cold take now, because in the event that if Purdy got injured again or if he was not ready to go, this could have bit the 49ers in the butt. Like, really. And I get it. Trey Lance didn't exactly have a good preseason, despite all the raving that was in the offseason training activities. And Sam Darnold, he was not good. He was not good in the preseason or in training camp. So, in retrospect, though, I mean, unfortunately, Trey Lance sadly was not going to be given a true opportunity to prove himself with San Francisco. And I get it. He had 4.5 games of actual starting experience with the 49ers, mainly due half of those games mainly due to Jimmy Garoppolo being hurt. And then the last game, which I fortunately had to see in person. I mean, not because, this is my first Niners game, but it's the game that, Trey Lance had that ankle injury. So essentially, that huge trade up in 2021 was a massive waste of time. So nonetheless, the Niners move forward with Brock Purdy. He's the starting quarterback now, but then his own questions remained. How healthy was going to be coming off that delayed offseason elbow surgery. How is he going to perform despite not having a full offseason to prepare for the regular season? Remember, he didn't have OTAs. He missed a little bit of training camp, but he came in, played a little bit of the preseason. But regular season is always different than the offseason stuff and preseason. So we get to the actual preseason, not the actual preseason, the actual regular season itself, and turns out Purdy did just fine, more than fine, just actually. He played like the quarterback that broke out late in the 2022 season in December when he played Tom Brady in the Bucs. Starting from that point on, he played like the quarterback that broke out. As he never got hurt in the NFC title game in Philadelphia. Supporting him was an all-star cast on offense, led by Brandon Ayuk at receiver and Deebo Samuel, running back Christian McCaffrey, and tight end George Kittle. The 49ers offense, especially when Purdy was spreading it around to them, it was like the most unlocked and lethal under Kyle Shanahan. It seemed like Shanahan was finally figuring out how to utilize just about everybody. Thanks to strong play on both sides of the ball, they got off to a 5-0 start, and they were pretty much dominating, almost dominating all the teams that they were playing, including the Dallas Cowboys on that Sunday night game that closed out a 3-game homestand. I mean, yeah, I guess in fairness, considering the quality of the opponents too, the Giants, the Cardinals, they're meh. But then you get a big win over the Dallas Cowboys early in the season. It's like, all right, something. But then you have the next 3 games when you have to go on the road for 2 of 3 of them, come home to play Cincinnati. That's where things took a really drastic turn before the bye week. And it really started to make fans like myself question, that validity of that undefeated start. Because you play a really tough defense, a really dominant defense like the Cleveland Browns on the road. And it rains a little bit. And you stay in it. Despite a crappy game from Purdy, and you also lose your key starters in Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams in that game, you're still kind of in it. In fairness, though, they were playing P.J. Walker. They were not playing Deshaun Watson in that game, but they were still kind of in it. But they lost on a barely missed field goal from their rookie kicker, Jake Moody. More on him in a bit, actually. But then they went on to lose in painful fashion to the Minnesota Vikings, and then they went on to lose in even more painful fashion to the Cincinnati Bengals at home to go into their bye week 5-3. So those 2 games against the Vikings and the Bengals were really where their cracks were kind of showing, because they sorely missed their key players like Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, which affected the offense, and including Purdy, because during that point in time, he was making some mistakes that weren't really seen before. In fairness, these quarterbacks have to go through, endure some growing pains. Not every quarterback is perfect. Let's be real here. There were a couple of back-breaking turnovers, including those that pretty much ended any hope of trying to come back and win in those 2 games, like the interception in the Vikings game, and then the brutal interception in a little bit in the 4th quarter in that Cincinnati game. But nonetheless, they had a bye week to reflect and try to get healthy, and it looked like it did the trick, because they got healthy in all shapes and sizes, and they came back looking like their dominant selves for the most part, at least. They finished the season on a 7-2 run. Those 2 losses coming to the Ravens on Christmas, and then the Rams, where they didn't really play any of their starters. More on that and why is that. And this was all despite losing probably their key piece of that defense, Talanoa Hufanga at safety, because he is physical. He is tough. Unfortunately, in that Tampa Bay game, they lost him to an ACL injury, and then they lost a key special teams player, George Odom, to a bicep injury. Fortunately, they were able to get him back miraculously. But the Niners, despite all those 2 major injuries, they still played like the team. They crushed their competition en route to another NFC West title, and they managed to get the NFC's top seed, which they previously lost grip of to the Philadelphia Eagles, but they had been in a statement win in that Week 13 game, that highly promoted Week 13 game. So, yeah, that was kind of the reason why they didn't play all that much in Week 18 against the Rams. So, yeah, they're pretty much resting their starters in preparation for that first round bye going into the playoffs. But I guess, like that first round bye was really, I guess, too much of a disadvantage because going into that game against the Packers, the 7-seeded Packers coming off that major upset over the Dallas Cowboys, the 2 seed, the Packers were on the verge of nearly eliminating the 49ers. No joke. No joke. It was like literally 3 weeks to prepare for whoever's going to be their playoff opponent. And, despite all the practices that they were putting in during the bye week and going into that game against Green Bay, they looked very sluggish. They were also underperforming in the rain for much of the game, especially Purdy, who looked really off. I mean, it doesn't help because of a certain front five was performing like dog shit in front of him, and then the defense was really giving up a lot of big chunk plays and making a lot of missed tackles to Jordan Love and the Packers offense. So it looked like a lot was being lost on, and a lot of stress was being induced onto the Niner faithful, and looked like a one-and-done appearance. A lot of the hope was being lost. But then they made the key plays. They rallied back when it mattered most. Purdy led a big fourth-quarter game-winning drive to pretty much erase the narrative that was bestowed upon in those 2 games against Minnesota and Cincinnati, and in, I guess, to a degree, Cleveland. So they go on this big fourth-quarter drive. Christian McCaffrey got a go-ahead touchdown. Dre Greenlaw intercepts Jordan Love. They seal a comeback win. They go to their 3rd straight NFC title game with a chance to rewrite recent history that has occurred on them in a bad way for the last 2 years. And in that NFC Championship game, like, oh boy, just when you thought the divisional game was bad, like, oh boy, the Lions one was an even worse start. It was an even worse performance to begin the game. Oh boy. If you all reflect on that game against the Lions, it was like a literal punch to the face. It was like you couldn't believe what the Lions were doing to this Niners team that's been in 3 straight NFC title games. It was like, were we reversing roles here? Were like the Niners the inexperienced ones in this game, where the Lions were just like the ones that appeared in 3 straight NFC title games? Like, was Dan Campbell the one that was being like Kyle Shanahan for the most part, except much better, more better coached than him? So anyway, they see themselves down 24-7 at halftime. Lifeless defense. Once again, lackadaisical effort on both sides of the ball. They're just getting stepped on, especially by that rushing attack of Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. But then something happened. Something happened in that game. The Lions got too cute. They got too aggressive. And that was a problem for Dan Campbell's team. I mean, this is not going to become a Lions recap or anything, but I just want to say this. Like, this is where Detroit's downfall began, and this is where the Niners' comeback began. They decided to go for it on a 4th down, midway through the 3rd quarter, when they should have went for a field goal, but that's where the Niners benefited. They rallied. That's where they began to rally back in very quick fashion, and they played much better from that point onwards, and they managed to proceed to score 27, literally 27 unanswered points in the blink of an eye. And eventually, they went on to finish the comeback. Woohoo! And against Detroit to go back to their first Super Bowl for the first time since 2019. But guess who was waiting on the other side? Okay, I'm not trying to be like Judgment Day, okay? But anyway, standing in the hopes of their way of finally finishing the story was the same familiar foe that crushed their hopes and dreams back in Miami all those few years ago before the Pando hit Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So in order for the Niners to finally finish their story, like, they were trying to be like Cody Rhodes, they had to conquer the Roman Reigns of the NFL, and that was Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And, well, I mean, despite all the mistakes that we were making, despite a tight back and forth chess battle, they managed to put up a 10-0 second quarter lead. They were almost halfway there to accomplishing that goal. The Niners defense actually put together their best performance of the playoffs. Steve Wilkes, their defensive coordinator, put on a really good showing for that first half. But unfortunately, first halves don't get you victories because the Chiefs managed to cut that thing 10-3 at halftime, and then things start to slowly downturn from there because a major special teams gaffe by Darrell Luter, Ray McLeod on a punt return. That's when the Chiefs started to get life. Great field position. They scored their only touchdown in the regulation. Yes, I say regulation because something happened in this game. But anyway, they took their first lead. The Niners managed to answer back, but you saw in that game that the momentum was clearly on the Chiefs' side. The Niners were like pissing themselves. Kyle Shanahan was pissing himself because they had it. They look, their momentum was on their side, but then one unlucky play let it slip away. So it went to overtime, unfortunately, in a game that it shouldn't have went to overtime, and it's a decision that gets debated on like even to this point. They made the decision to get the ball first because the new overtime rules, both teams get a possession even if you scored a touchdown. It's because of what happened with the Chiefs and the Bills 2 years ago. And the Niners actually were in striking distance of scoring the touchdown first in order to force the Chiefs to answer or it's game over. But then the offensive line gave up. The offensive line allowed Chris Jones to go unblocked, notably Spencer Burford. They cost him 7 points, and they were forced to take 3. It's like, what the fuck were we doing here? Like, what the hell are we doing here? And I know he went on to apologize about it afterwards, but it's like, you fucked up. You fucked up right there. And Burford was coming in to fill in for John Feliciano, who was injured. But it's like, there's like, what the hell are you doing? And then we all knew what was going to happen from there. You can't score 3 points. You can't score just 3 points on Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And sadly, even though they were on their last down, Patrick Mahomes still managed to convert a key fourth down. And then once he converted that key fourth down, I believe it's like behind the 30-yard line or whatever, slowly but surely, Patrick Mahomes made the Niners' dreams of getting that elusive title number 6, trying to finish the story. It was as dead as Liv Morgan's revenge tour, no matter how you want to slice it. Her revenge tour of Rhea Ripley going to WrestleMania because, the man has to have a that's not going to work for me, brother, kind of deal. No matter how you want to slice it, it was a slow march down the field. The defense had lost Dre Greenlaw to a freak injury in that game. They were getting gassed. They were getting picked on. They were getting swifted. It was just painful to watch. It was just a painful watch as slowly but surely, but in one last act of getting cucked in the end zone, the Niners let their Super Bowl winning dreams get buried. Like again, the revenge tour of Liv Morgan. In the worst way possible as they let Mecole Hardman open for Patrick Mahomes to get the game-winning touchdown. So yeah, that's how the never-ending quest for 6 rolls on. And yeah, no, I'm just kidding about Liv Morgan stuff because, they're trying to do something about that, by the way. But as for the 49ers, their quest for 6 continue, their never-ending story for it rolls on. It was a game that they could have had, but they let it slip away. So, that's your story of your 2023 NFL season. But I mean, it isn't all that bad. It was like, for all of it was worth, there were some good things about it. One of those good things was you found out a lot about Brock Purdy in his first full season as a starter. In spite of the way going into the preseason, going into the regular season, not having a full off season to prepare, Purdy played pretty effectively. Always quick to get the ball out, willing to take downfield risks still, and, taking a lot of risks. Although as the season progressed, I'm not sure why he was kept more in the pocket, which I absolutely hated. It was only during the NFC Championship game where Kyle Shanahan finally let him loose. Unfortunately, in the Super Bowl, he's, again, kept more contained. I guess it has to more with a certain issue that I'm going to talk about later. So, in regards to Purdy, he was still finding ways to get others involved, even when his top playmakers were having low games. Look what third receiver Juwan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, look what they were doing to keep the team alive in the Super Bowl. It just goes to show you like who had to step up and what Purdy did to get them to step up. Despite not just how the season ended, but again, that glaring problem I'm going to talk about. And then look at Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk. They were pretty much the MVPs of that offense. Christian McCaffrey had a great season, being that hard-nosed, all-purpose running back. I think it was like 17 straight. He was on that 17 touchdown streak all season long. He played pretty much every game this season, despite a few concerning injuries. And it just goes to show you how much tougher he has been since coming here compared to his days in Carolina. And then, of course, you have Brandon Ayuk at receiver, becoming Purdy's go-to number one receiver that can run his routes and knows where Purdy wants to go. And the Niners got to do all they can to retain him. They got to do all they can to retain him this offseason. Unfortunately, there were a couple of things in this season that I was complaining about and reared its ugly head in the way that the season ended. The main thing, though, that really pissed me off about every game that I talked about, well, actually mostly every game that I talked about, was that offensive line. Like, my God, it's like, how have we gone two seasons where they have not addressed the offensive line? Because the offensive line play this season was shit. It was inconsistently shit. Because despite Purdy playing so well, he had to do so in spite of a crappy, dirty pocket. Half of the starting offensive line allowed some of the most pressure in the league. Most notably on the right side, with Colton McKivitz and whoever was at right guard, be it Spencer Burford to start the season or John Feliciano later on in the season. And John Feliciano wasn't as bad as Spencer Burford, but still, the right side of the line was atrocious. And don't get me started with Jake Rendell, because he was getting trucked in the middle. Left guard Aaron Banks, he had a down year after a strong prior one, but I would say that I hope he gets better in the next year. So when you factor all that, Purdy was one of the most pressured and hit quarterbacks in the league, and that led to a lot of injury concern, which did actually happen at a few points during the regular season, most notably in that game in Arizona. And I was like, fuck. And then that really came into play against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and that was despite a defensive front that was missing one of their key starters in edge rusher Charles Omenihu. Because if Omenihu played in that game, the Niners would have been in serious trouble with Omenihu and then Chris Jones. I mean, I feel like they managed to contain George Karlaftis in that game, but it's like Chris Jones was just like on a wrecking crew in that game. So the offensive line's inability to protect their quarterback, it was just one of the cherries on tops on why they lost that game. But another reason why they lost that game was the culmination of that slow, gradual decline of the defense under Steve Wilkes. Like, you possess a strong defensive front, a talented defensive front of Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Fred Warner at linebacker, and Dre Greenlaw, too, safety Talanoa Hufanga before he got injured, among other key playmakers. And yes, like, it was always going to be hard to replace D'Amico Ryans at D coordinator, but, Steve Wilkes coming off a pretty solid decent campaign as interim coach of Carolina, it was always going to be a debatable move prior to the season. But when the season started, I thought it was going to be. It seemed like a good move. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to backtrack on that. But then when you progress through the season, you really start to question him, his schemes, decision making. It really started to come into question. Like for example, like why are you calling a blitz on the Vikings when that ultimately failed? Like there's nobody down the field to cover whoever got the touchdown, and they scored before the half. It was on a 3rd down play. It was a shitty call, and Steve Wilkes was like, "Oh, I'm still gonna call that anyway on certain 3rd down plays after on the ensuing games afterwards." Like, no, don't do that. Not on 3rd down. Like, don't call those zero cover blitz on 3rd downs. No. So the defense continued to struggle, even when they moved him down the sidelines. But it was just evident that the talent was like superseding the schemes of Wilkes. Like the talent was able to just take themselves so far because, in spite of Steve Wilkes, which the players were even questioning all the things that Steve Wilkes was doing halfway through the season. It's just like when your players start to question the decision making of Steve Wilkes or your own whoever was defensive coordinator, you know there's issues. You know there were issues with the team, and when you know your head coach is doing it too, you know you made a bad decision. You know you made a bad hire. I mean, you know, at least for Steve Wilkes though, it wasn't like a bad way per se to end the season because you know he at least did have himself a good coaching job in the Super Bowl, but that was at least for like most of the game until the 4th quarter and overtime. So, I mean, he did get fired. He did get fired after the Super Bowl. But I mean, it wasn't just why and what happened in the Super Bowl is what caused him to get fired. It's just like everything that led up to it is why he got fired. As of right now, the Niners haven't found a defensive coordinator. They haven't hired one yet. But they better find a good one. They better find someone that can relate to the players, that can be as energetic as the players, that can match that energy. Not Brandon Staley, please. Please to God, not Brandon Staley. Like we don't need the clippering energy that can match Kyle Shanahan's choking energy. Like we don't need the LA Clippers North. We don't need the LA Clippers Bay Area energy in here. No, don't do that. And if you want some LA Clippering, look at Kyle Shanahan, a Super Bowl masterclass yet again. Like this is like probably their best chance to win a Super Bowl against a Chiefs team that was probably at their weakest point. You know, no top receiver. Their defense, you know, it was like their strongest that they've been, but their offense was a lot of lacking names. And Travis Kelce, you know, still a dominant tight end, but kind of a down year. And so was kind of Patrick Mahomes. So this is probably their best chance, especially Kyle Shanahan's very best chance to win a Super Bowl, despite all the odds being stacked against them. The NFL, Roger Goodell, Mahomes and the Chiefs, the shitty practice field conditions, Taylor Swift, SpongeBob SquarePants, Dora the Explorer, of all people. They were all against them. When you have Dora the Explorer roasting your ass, trying to tell you where to get a touchdown during the game, not just for the Chiefs, but for your team too, you know they're against you. Like this is them telling you, this is SpongeBob telling you, this is Dora telling you that you have to finish the story. In this particular Super Bowl, they were up 10-0, but the execution and the play calling left so much to be desired from the get-go. And slowly but surely, they could have ran away with the game if they could have dialed up some more plays. They could have let Purdy try to escape from the pocket, but instead, Kyle Shanahan let the Chiefs hang around once more, just like he did in 2019 with Super Bowl 54. And when his team was behind and tied, going to the extra period, no adjustments or barely any adjustments were made. He's just like Triple H with booking certain stars. Like I keep mentioning it, Liv Morgan. He doesn't try to think the long game. He doesn't want his whole team or a certain star to finish the story. They don't want to put a long, good story together. They just want to, okay, we'll stick this and go with it. We'll just like think of it on the fly. Kyle Shannon is like that Rhea and Becky story right now. It's like, oh, we'll just do it. We'll just stick with what works. Like, we don't need to change anything up. So, with Kyle Shannon, he had a chance to finally erase all the pain he had in just like before he left Atlanta with that 28-3, all that when he was offensive coordinator. He could have erased all that with a potential title win. But he once again let his team down. He let himself down by getting outcoached in the biggest game of the sport. That was the Super Bowl. So now what do we do? Where are we left with my San Francisco 49ers going into the offseason? Scout combine's going on as we speak. And then, free agency. We have the draft. And then in just no short order, the players are going to be coming back for OTAs. Then you have training camp, obviously. Things are coming up really fast for the 49ers. So a lot of things to think about. A lot of decisions that have to be made for this team if they want to try to do it again, but this time on top next year. That's if they get there next year. So looking at their offseason going into 3 weeks now? 3 weeks now when the new league year opens up. They have around just under $1 million, around $800,000 as they speak. Like, oh my God, man. It's like, that's frustrating. That's frustrating to look at. I mean, I'm not no salary cap expert, but it's just like, when you look at it as a filthy casual fan, it's like, that's like a month's worth of rent. That's like a week's worth of rent here in California. So anyway, yeah, they have around $800,000 in cash. So not a lot of money to spend as we speak. So decisions have to be made. Their first round draft pick, they finally have one this year. After the botched Trey Lance deal that they made in 2021. So they finally get a first round pick. So they'll be picking 31. That's what you get when you lose the Super Bowl. But now they have some decisions to be made with their free agents class. So some of their key free agents include their edge rushers in Chase Young, Clinton Farrell, and Randy Gregory. They also have to make a decision on their 2020 defensive tackle, Javon Kinlaw. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so now he gets to be an unrestricted free agent. The guard and center in question that I talked about, John Feliciano. Special teams receiver, Raymond McLeod. Safety, Tashawn Gibson. You don't know if he's going to retire or he might come back for another year on a cheaper deal. And then restricted free agent receiver, Jawan Jennings. Are they going to give him the second round deal, or are they going to try to come up with a long-term deal? I don't know. But they did at least make a move to try and get some money. Like, they released corner Isaiah Oliver, which looked like a Steve Wilkes hire, by the way. So maybe that should give them some money. Like, I don't know. They said $2 million was saved up, but hopefully that gives them something. So what do they need to address? What do they need to address this offseason that starts, like I said, in 3 weeks? Well, the first thing they got to do is get some more money. Get some more money so you can spend that money. So, like I said, I think the new league year salary cap was raised by $30 million. I saw something on Twitter that said that. It was announced by the NFL. So, even so, they're still getting onto that fine line of being over the cap. $2 million is not a lot to spend, if you ask me. I mean, I don't know all the salary cap rules, but if we're just talking about spending and all that, saving, $2 million is not a lot to spend. So John Lynch in that front office need to get more money to spend. They also talked about something. Oh, they got $39 million that's going to roll over. If that does happen, great. But again, they got to start somewhere. They're going to have to restructure some of those big fat contracts that are on the team. They do have an option of releasing someone like Eric Armstead, who doesn't have the option anymore. They don't have the option anymore of restructuring like a contract that he has, because I do think he is on the last year of his restructured deal, but I don't quote me on that. But either way, you have to make some cost-cutting moves, whether it's restructuring contracts, releasing some guys that are dead weight. You got to get more money. You have to get more money to spend on your key needs on this team. Speaking of key needs, your number one priority is got to be fixing that damn offensive line. Fix that first. You got to get a new right guard, new starting right tackle, new center. Nothing else should be bought until that offensive line is fixed. So, one of those you could get in free agency, and two of those can be get in the draft. All of them need to be starting caliber, because until you can fix that offensive line, the Niners aren't winning jack shit. There's no finishing the story for 6, no quest for 6, until you can get the proper protection for your quarterback. That being Brock Purdy. And then, I'm not sure if they're going to be ready to consider this, but maybe you have to start considering drafting Trent Williams' successor at left tackle, because eventually, he's not going to be around forever, because he's getting up there in age. So maybe use one of those draft picks to get a left tackle, hopefully a good one that they can scout, and start grooming him. Start having him be under the mentorship of Trent Williams. So eventually, yeah, he's going to hang it up. So might as well start considering now getting that left tackle that can, be the successor to Trent Williams. It's going to be a difficult transition, though. But I mean, hey, might as well start now. So yeah, the number one priority has to be the offensive line. Nothing else should take precedent. The offensive line has to be the number one priority. New right guard, new right tackle, new center, all starting caliber. And then once you do that, you start considering extending Brandon Ayuk. No, not considering. You do it. That's the other top priority. Reach a long-term deal with top receiver Brandon Ayuk. He played very well late in 2022, and then played well all year. Going to 2024, he's going to be playing on the final year of his rookie deal. They picked up his 5th-year option, but it's going to be better for the Niners, and Ayuk to come together to get a long-term contract done. So you want to have Purdy's go-to option ready to play, locked up for the next couple of years, and not have to worry about, is he going to sign somewhere else? Or is he going to demand more money as an unrestricted free agent in 2025? So, yeah, you have to come together with Brandon Ayuk and his agent. Hopefully they don't demand too much money, and get a long-term deal done. And then some other minor things to consider. Maybe go and get another cornerback in the draft to go alongside Traveris Ward and Diamador Lenore, because their secondary play still shit. Is still shit. And then maybe consider drafting a linebacker, because Dre Greenlaw, with his torn Achilles, he may or may not be available for this coming season, 2024. So they should consider drafting a linebacker, not multiple linebackers. Maybe a linebacker to fill in his place, unless they have one already. I don't know. So either way, the Niners in 2023, they had a successful season until it wasn't at the very end. Yeah, why do I say that? Purdy, despite he played very well coming off a serious elbow injury, and despite the crappy offensive line play, led his team to a Super Bowl appearance. But why do I say until it wasn't a successful season at the very end? Because, it all went to waste, because Kyle Shanahan let the team down. In fairness, some of the other players on that team let themselves down, and they didn't win it. They didn't win the Super Bowl. They didn't let the story finish. They kept the never-ending quest for 6 roll on. So 2 weeks later, as we talk about them, I said back then, and I'll say it again, it's only going to get much harder for San Francisco to try and get back to this point, because you look at 2024. Yes, it's like 7 months from now when the NFL regular season starts. Depending on what they do in this offseason, the NFC is going to get stronger. The Packers, the Eagles, the Cowboys, Lions, their own division in the Rams, and hell, it's going to be a long shot, but even Arizona, it's going to be on their ass. They're going to be on their butts. It's only going to get tougher from here. Despite heavy draft capital that they have, the limited cap space is going to prevent them from doing much in a few weeks. Once the New Year League starts, unless they start making drastic moves to get a lot more money. So it's going to be a long offseason. Actually, it already is a long offseason for the San Francisco 49ers. But if they want to finally finish the story in 2024, like, who knows, Cody Rhodes or whoever at WrestleMania in April, if I even watch that shit, they need to make some serious commitments to protecting Brock Purdy this offseason. Especially considering that, after 2024, they're going to have to make some even more difficult decisions on this roster next year in 2025. So they better start making some serious commitments this offseason, because next offseason, next year, it could be even more difficult to keep this roster together. So anyway, it is a long ramble. It was a long talk about my team, but a lot of stuff has to be said going into this offseason and then beyond. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the San Francisco 49ers 2023 season. And what do you guys want the Niners to do in this offseason that's to come in a couple weeks and in the draft? Let me know your thoughts in the comments on YouTube, or send me a message on social media on X and Instagram at Cold Lasagna. I just hope the Niners fix the number one thing that they need to fix, and that is the offensive line. But I would like to know your thoughts on what else they need to do. However you want to send that to my way. But anyway, that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your filthy casual host, Lasagna. Thank you for tuning in to episode number 187 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And we'll be getting the ball rolling with NFL season recap month 2023 very soon. Hopefully we'll get the ball rolling on that. And yes, we will get part 1 up and running. But until then, until the next episode, peace out.